All right, welcome to Bet the Edge. I'm Jay Croucher here with Drew Dinsick. We're recording halfway through the second quarter of Sunday Night Football. Today we're going to talk about the Sunday games, the Week 13 openers, and then close out with the Harbaugh Bowl as the Ravens play the Chargers on Monday Night Football. But Drew, let's start off with the Sunday slate. And what I'm most interested in is where do you rate the Commanders now? Do you think that they are still better than your average team on neutral?
I don't. And I think that in general, the same kind of predictable concerns about Cliff Kingsbury's offense have all come home to roost. There is a lack of talent at the wide receiver position in Washington. They have Terry McLaurin and not a lot else. And I think the creativity that Kingsbury brought to the table, combined with the unexpected and unpredictable and just a little bit of uncertainty around how to defend Daniels, was responsible for a lot of their early season success. And that has completely dried on the vine. There doesn't seem to be an act two. There doesn't seem to be an off-speed pitch. And that looks to be problematic. The fact that they could not get right today against the Dallas Cowboys defense that was completely hopeless against another problematic offense in the Texans on Monday on a short week spells sincere degree of concern. And I think that right now the fact that there are so many teams in the wild card mix breathing down their necks is a huge problem. The fact that one of those teams in Tampa Bay got an easy win today and has a head-to-head win over them is a problem. The fact that there is still a little bit of clustering at the top of the NFC West, which does not include the Niners, and we'll go there in a minute, I'm sure, is a problem. Washington and all of the kind of upside that existed seems to be in a little bit of it feels like fool's gold at this point. In fact, they closed 10.5-point favorites and really never felt like they were realistically that much better than a completely defeated and injured Dallas team is kind of a good encapsulation of where they stand. And I think rating them better than an average team on a neutral is being a little bit too kind to the way that they currently ought to be viewed. And could say a lot of the same things about the Niners. Really struggling with where I viewed them and where they ought to be as well.
Do you think that the Niners, that it's just the lack of personnel on defense that is just ruining at the moment? Obviously, it's difficult when you have Brandon Allen going on the road against an opportunistic defense, but Brock Purdy comes back in. They were still an elite offense when Purdy was out there. So is it just purely they've just lost too many guys on defense between Greenlaw and Hufanga and Travarius Ward being out? Bosa obviously out, and these guys have just gotten old. A lot of other guys have just gotten old at the same time or just weren't very good.
A little bit of everything. The entire way that played out caught me completely by surprise. Worst bet I've made all season was Niners plus 2.5. That closed 6.5. Should have closed 16.5 apparently. And watching the game, it felt like the kind of the brain trust and the people in charge are not communicating well with the men in that locker room. There was some sincere lack of effort at times against the Packers. There was some hilariously poor defensive tackling in that game. There were some moments where Josh Jacobs was bouncing off of several wannabe tacklers, and I felt like the appropriate soundtrack should have been Yakety Sax, as the Niners just were helpless. And that's not a Niners team that I recognized. And I think that when a team kind of knows that their season is on the line and their backs are against the wall, and then there's a rug pull to the degree that there was this week with their quarterback being taken out of practice on Thursday and then ruled down on Friday, it was obviously tough for those guys to get up for this game. And when you're at this part of the season It's not always about talent. It's certainly about effort. It's certainly about rest. It's certainly about just generally your physical, your physical ability to prepare for a given week, and in some degrees, motivation. And I think there is certainly 5 teams right now across the NFL that you can point to and say they're not trying to win. And I did not think that we would be including the Niners even remotely in that part of the conversation this week. But it did not feel like after this team was down and their backs were against the wall and they had Brandon Allen under center that they were willing to fight. And I think that is a little bit of an indictment of how, the team overall is currently construed, and how the communication between the coaching staff and the front office and the players is kind of getting to the field. It's I don't think that this is Brock Purdy returns and here comes the cavalry and everybody gets up and tries on Sunday. There are certainly whiffs of, I don't think that there's necessarily fight in this team this year, considering who is available and the state of this team from a performance standpoint.
Indeed. All right. Well, the other kind of disaster-ish team from the day, and the disaster is Cap because they're in such a strong position in the division, but Houston loses 8-point favorites home to Tennessee. They sack Will Levis 8 times. They get a pick 6 from Will Levis and still contrive to lose the game after Kaimi Fairbairn misses a chip shot. Do you think the Texans are just not particularly good, and you just have to rate them as closer to a point above average, like a kind of much more in the kind of Seattle Seahawks type of range than the Buffalo Bills type of range that they were thought of, a couple of months ago?
Absolutely. In fact, giving them a point over average, I feel like, is being generous. The defense, which was rating well, I think has proven to be much more boom or bust than I was willing to acknowledge. They can generate pressure, they can get sacks, they can make life tough for a quarterback, and then they can turn around and give up 70-yard touchdown passes like it's their job. And it's a huge disappointment. They got Tank Dell and playing at kind of closer to the level we remember from last year. Finally, they have Nico Collins back after a week of recovery, and still the offense is completely stuck in mud. Bobby Slowick's sequencing of play calling is atrocious. The running game was useless. All of the kind of hooping and hollering and celebrating in the fourth quarter of the Monday Night Football game when they finally scored a second half touchdown. Well, what happened this week? No second half touchdown. Back, I guess things weren't solved. And I think that ultimately this is a very, very concerning step backwards for CJ Stroud. You mentioned the Fairbairn missed field goal, which was fluky considering the fact that guy has made so many clutch 50-plus yarders this year. I will give him some grace. But CJ Stroud steps out of the end zone for the game-ending safety, effectively. And it's like, you put too much on his shoulders too early in his career, and you're not giving him enough help as far as a play caller if you're the offensive coordinator. And I think that's really where most of the criticism lies. And then on the defensive side of the ball, congratulations for being a unit that can generate pressure so frequently and can generate sacks so consistently. But you are giving up home run after home run after home run through the passing game, and you're not addressing it. And I think that is a little bit of an indictment of the defensive side as well. So considering the Texans better than average on neutral, I think is being kind to them.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, the past 4 weeks, I think Bryce Young has outplayed CJ Stroud. We now have like a month sample of, and I'd still obviously rather have CJ Stroud going forward, but that debate may resurface from the dead after being very much beyond the dead for a time. But Stroud, just like one of the picks that he threw was horrific.
Yeah.
And that team is just a little bit all over the place at the moment, but still they should coast to the division. And then I think they might get trucked in round 1, particularly if it's the Ravens as the 5 seed, which is very possible. But if it's the Chargers, I think are materially better. than Houston as well. Like they're not going to get to the 5 seed, but I think the Dolphins as well, the way they're playing, are probably better than the Texans too. So the Texans, they go from everyone's kind of favorite pick to win the AFC to now being, potentially the sixth best team in the conference. Maybe it's the 7th best team with the way that the Broncos are playing and the Steelers in that mix as well. All right, it's the second helping of Sunday Night Football this week. Finish your Thanksgiving holiday by watching the Dolphins take on Jordan Love and the Packers at Lambeau Field at 8 p.m. Eastern. Then wrap up your weekend with the 49ers traveling across the country to face Josh Allen and the Bills in Buffalo. Both matchups can only be seen on NBC and Peacock. All right, Week 13 openers. We'll leave the Thanksgiving games for tomorrow. So let's focus on the Sunday games for the most part. Was there any one opener that leapt off the page to you?
I thought in general the openers were reasonably fair, but the one I want to kind of key on is Cardinals-Vikings. I thought in a lot of ways the kind of worst of the Cardinals was exposed today against the Seahawks defense. And I'm struggling right now to hold on to faith that the Vikings have not been solved. I don't think they have been. I think there are still some upside to this defense. I think that the offense still has a number of very, very fun and efficient and effective ways to attack you through the air. And I think that the Cardinals could be very, very susceptible to that. And then Kyler Murray gets banged up today, on top of the fact that they really are just in general not an especially deep or effective team. This spells trouble. And I think the fact that this is starting to drift already from the opener of 3.5 out to 4 is correct. And I think Vikings, realistically, if we get any kind of bad news around Murray, even just missed practices, this could go more. And I think Vikings probably ought to be favored by closer to 6 here, considering sort of the current state of the Cardinals.
Yeah, the Kyler element is strange because Gannon said after the game that Kyler just had the wind knocked out of him, and that he was only in the blue tent because an independent spotter called down because of the force of the hit. I mean, he certainly didn't look great, but it didn't seem like there was any concern really about him coming back into the game. So it was just a weird game overall, as the Seahawks haven't been used to that level of defense from them, where it really did seem like they were swarming Arizona. To hold the Cardinals to 6 points is very impressive, even if Kyler was a little bit limited. I don't think it's wrong or anything, but I think the most compelling line is the fact that the Commanders are now only -6 home to the Titans, which kind of speaks to what we were talking about, where if you were viewing the Titans as a kind of -4, -4.5 type of team, and perhaps they get upgraded a bit because of the performance in Houston. But now the Commanders, this kind of speaks to the idea that they are basically an average team at the moment. And I don't usually like to buy into macro trends because I find them more descriptive than anything. But the Cliff Kingsbury's offense is just constantly tailing off in the second halves of seasons, which is strange because it's always like different personnel. In theory, there should be schematic tweaks, but the fact that it has begun to tail off, it seems like, doesn't bode particularly well. What did you think, by the way, about the decision to kick the point after at the end of the game? Would you have done that if you were Dan Quinn?
I didn't even think about that. I guess I was confused about the kicker in general. Misses an extra point early. They go for 2. They get back to the square. He hits a 51-yarder to kind of help rescue things. And then, you're 10.5 point favorites. You're home. It didn't really appear obvious to me that going for 2 was kind of in the cards there. But in hindsight, considering you maybe have a kicker who's got a little bit of the yips kicking extra points, maybe you should have considered it. But that whole ending was just absolute insanity. I guess Dan Quinn is I'm a little like I'm melancholy thinking about the way that his season arc is going right now, and I'm not sure what saves it, but it certainly feels like this is pretty kind of similar to some other Dan Quinn experiences that I've felt as they fade into oblivion without putting up much of a fight.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see what price he reopens for Coach of the Year, but that obviously has to drift a fair bit. I think he's fallen out of the tier one of guys who I think really now are Dan Campbell, Kevin O'Connell, and then we'll see if Jim Harbaugh wants to join that tier on Monday night. I think a win would vault him right up there with those guys. Like Quinn, the thing with Quinn is that he's still 7-5. They won 4 games last year. If the team was still playing well, there would still be plenty of upside. They have an easy schedule. They could easily just close 4-1, finish with momentum, 11-6 wild card, go from 4 wins to 11, finish with a surge. But it just seems like the team just isn't very good anymore, which is the issue at the moment. I think with the decision at the end, there's a lot of hindsight bias there, where of course, because he missed the point after, everyone now thinks that Quinn should have gone for 2. I don't think it's that clear cut either, just because, to your point, you're 10.5 point favorites at home. You're finally moving the ball. I think in most scenarios, you should not just kind of put the game in a 50-50 position on one play when you are the superior team like that. But I do think that it probably becomes more of a 50-50 call, because the kicker did miss the previous point after. And also because I think that, if you want a quarterback for that specific situation, and Jaden Daniels had already run one in, it's probably I'd probably take Josh Allen first at this point, to be honest, just because of his power and being able to move forward for 2 yards. But it's Allen, Mahomes, Lamar, and I know that they're also the 3 best quarterbacks in the NFL, so that helps. But even just because of their agility, but you'd have Daniels, I think, 4th or 5th in that situation, just because of his threat as a runner. So I think that balances out. Ultimately, I don't think it's the worst call, but I tell you what, as someone who would have preferred that the Commanders win that game, as soon as I saw the kicker, he did not look like he was in a good spot. I'll never forget I don't know if you remember the Tommy Cutlets Monday night game last year, where they beat Jordan Love and the Packers.
Oh, yeah.
And it was, what was the name of the kicker? I think it was Randy Bullock was the kicker for the Giants.
Yes.
And he missed the field goal.
Big boy.
He was coming on to kick the game winner, and he just looked absolutely petrified. And and Aikman says on the broadcast, that's a man who looks like he's got a lot going through his brain right now. And I felt the same way about the Washington kicker. Now, to his credit, Randy Bullock, Slotsville, absolutely nailed it. I guess the muscle memory just kicked in. But the muscle memory did not kick in. I get that it was a bad snap, but it felt like the holder had done a pretty good job of salvaging the snap. And yeah, it just felt like that bloke was destined to miss that from the jump. All right, last one for us to hit on. Browns Broncos. Broncos 5.5 point favorites here. The total is 41.5. Do you think this line is correct?
No, it's a massive number. Massive. And I know maybe you got like a last gasp rivalry effort out of the Browns on Thursday Night Football, but they get extra rest here. And yeah, you have a rookie quarterback going up against Myles Garrett and company. No thanks. This is too big. I'm going to monitor this one pretty carefully. Going to go watch the tape again on the Broncos Raiders, which I watched virtually none of. Make sure I'm not missing anything. But Broncos being this type of favorite against a team that's trying just doesn't check out to me.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think the Browns, I mean, if Myles Garrett is going to replicate what he did on Thursday night, then the defense looks completely different. And the thing too with Garrett is that he was banged up the whole first 4-6 weeks of the season, leaving games. He's got these like chronic foot issues from birth that are rearing their heads that apparently have to get operated on. Well, seems like he's fine now. Doesn't seem like there's anything wrong with him. Do you think that the Broncos offense has been somewhat a product of just playing suspect defenses? I mean, Bo Nix certainly looks a lot better, but how much do you think it is that the Broncos are now like a good offense versus that they've been torching kind of weaker defenses?
Yeah, I'd say 90-10. It's because of the defenses. It's good coaching. It's good progression. There's clearly something there, but this is still an offense that ought to be rated in the mid-20s. I don't think that there's much special going on here outside of the offensive line play, and Bo Nix is certainly benefiting from that. And his closure on Daniels as offensive rookie of the year is absolute must watch. I feel like Daniels is going to ultimately pull away, and that's going to be one where it's try to catch the price at the right time and bet Daniels.
I see they might be right now. Daniels is going to play the Titans, so I understand that their defense has been okay. I think it's a little bit fraudulent, especially with L'Jarius Sneed done. But Knicks, like this Knicks stretch. So it started off against New Orleans, where I get that the numbers were fine, but like I watched that game. Bo Nix wasn't good in that game. That was when he had like the viral missed 3 open receivers on the same pass. I didn't think he was good that game. And then he lights up the Panthers. He's like, they lose 41-10 to Baltimore. He wasn't terrible in that game, but Baltimore has a terrible pass defense. The Chiefs have a terrible pass defense. The Falcons defense is just a mess. And then the Raiders are just kind of done. Like, I didn't know that they still have players on that defense, but he hasn't really done it against a good pass defense, I would say. And so Cleveland, for their sins, I think should be a step up. And yeah, I'm just excited to see Bo Nix excited. I don't really care that much, but I'm interested to see him under just some duress a little bit more and see him have to continue to create. And so maybe Myles Garrett is the man for that job in prime time. And then after that, bye week, home Colts. That's another fairly easy game. And then at Chargers, at Cincy, home Kansas City. So they'll be dogs in their last 3 games. The way I think this is going to go is that Knicks is going to shift into favorite. Sean Payton is going to surge into being a tier 1 coach of the year priced candidate.
Yeah,
and then I think it's going to all kind of unravel in the last 3 weeks where they, the modal outcome, those 3 games is probably going 1 and 2. And I think that'll be enough. Certainly enough to knock off Payton. Payton's not going to win if he has, 7 losses, at least 7 losses. But if he goes 1 and 2 there, and then Knicks, Knicks may well win the award, but I still think it's ultimately going to be Jaden Daniels when it is all said and done. All right, spend your Black Friday with the Big Ten on NBC and Peacock. Our triple header starts with a serving of men's basketball at 2:30 p.m. Eastern, followed by women's volleyball at 4:30. The day wraps up with Iowa football hosting Nebraska in prime time. As you all know by now, we've teamed up with BetMGM this season. We'll be using BetMGM lines to make all our picks, and we'll have special offers for our listeners each week. If you haven't signed up to BetMGM yet, use bonus code BETEDGE, and you'll get up to a $1,500 first bet offer on your first wager with BetMGM. Here's how it works. Download the BetMGM app and sign up using bonus code BETEDGE. Deposit at least $10 and place your first wager on any game, and you'll receive up to $1,500 in bonus bets if your first bet loses. Just make sure you use bonus code BETEDGE when you sign up. See BetMGM.com for terms. 21 plus only. U.S. promotional offers not available in New York, Nevada, Ontario, or Puerto Rico. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Available in the U.S. Call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369 in New York. Call 1-800-NEXT-STEP in Arizona, 1-800-327-5050 in Massachusetts, 1-800-BETS-OFF in Iowa, 1-800-981-0023 in Puerto Rico. First bet offer for new customers only, subject to eligibility requirements. Rewards are non-withdrawable bonus bets that expire in 7 days in partnership with Kansas Crossing Casino and Hotel. Don't forget, if you haven't signed up for BetMGM yet, use bonus code BETEDGE and get your $1,500 first bet offer today. Okay, let's close out with Monday Night Football, Ravens at Chargers. The Ravens are 2.5-point favorites in Los Angeles. The total is 50.5 on Monday Night Football. There's going to be a lot of brother chat. A lot of throwing 3 fades to Michael Crabtree in the end zone chat. Super Bowl on the line. Let me tell you, that was before I was really betting back then. I watched that in a bar in London at, I want to say 2 a.m. I don't know if the time zones line up that way, but it felt like 2 a.m. Closed down the bar at one of the worst hostels I've ever been at in my life, but I digress. I'm glad I didn't have money on that game I'm glad I didn't have money on San Francisco in that game because that would have driven me absolutely insane to lose in that fashion. But we're in 2024 now. And the Ravens are 2.5-point favorites. Do you think there's any bet to be made on the line?
You tuned in for the Beyonce halftime show, and then you called it a night.
Well,
I get it.
that was when the lights went out, right?
Yeah,
Which really put my evening back.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. If it's already that late. Why? How could I? I guess this is a sign. No, the general kind of hard bowl nature of this kind of misses me. If we're being honest, I'm much more interested in the matchup of quarterbacks here. Lamar Jackson and Justin Herbert are playing at top 6 level. Top 1 for Lamar, top 6 for Justin, and I look at this as opportunities for both players to really be able to thrive. The Chargers right now, their defense is missing some key pieces. The Ravens are a pass funnel. So if Justin Herbert is going to have kind of a breakout passing game, this is presumably the opponent that it's going to happen against. The Chargers are kind of professional. They're well coached. They're well prepared. Their opponent specific preparation has been clear, where they are coming up with game plans that specifically try to tailor the weaknesses of their opponents, as opposed to just going out there and doing what they do, a la Cliff Kingsbury and the Commanders. And I think that that actually will serve them well here, because the Ravens are not a team you can run the football against. And I will be somewhat surprised if this is sort of a traditional oh, by the way, Greg Roman revenge game. If this is a traditional Greg Roman, like, hey, we're going to establish the run. If you watch the Ravens tape, that's pointless. And I think that in general, this should be kind of a pass over expectation type of a game for the Chargers offense. And I think that could work. And then on the flip side, the Chargers defense has gotten by beating up on lousy opposition for most of the season. And when the going got tough against the Bengals, they folded. It was largely some pretty fluky, high leverage stuff that they came away with at the very tail end of that game to give their team a chance to win that secured that victory. Otherwise, Joe Burrow got whatever he wanted, whenever he wanted against that defense. And I think that is set up for Lamar to kind of do something somewhat similar here. So this should be a really fun and interesting game. I'm, kind of now personally pretty heavily invested against Lamar MVP, as we'll talk about this week, I'm sure. But so if he has sort of a signature Monday Night Football performance, which he is wont to do, I'm going to be a little bit bummed. But this is the right kind of defense to do it against, because there's some key pieces here for the Chargers that won't be out there, namely Cam Hart, who's been such a huge part not just of their coverage being awesome this year, but of their just a good tackler, which is what you need when you're going up against Derrick Henry and company. So I think the angle I had into this game when it was 3 was Chargers, because I make this game close to 2, but now at 2.5, I'm inclined to pass on the side, and my angle into the total was under, but I don't really have the stones to get involved in an under 50.5 here, when there are so many advantages for both of these offenses that are pretty clear and present and obvious in the passing game. And so I think ultimately this should be kind of a score and answer type of environment here. And if it is, and for whatever reason, a lower scoring first half, I'm going to get involved in the second half over. And I think that in general, either of these teams being at a deficit at halftime would make for a comeback bet opportunity. So keeping most of my powder dry and looking to get involved in the second half here.
Yeah, I think the Bengals game was very instructive and a reminder that, the Chargers defense is fine, it's solid, but great offense always, well, not always, but great offense is the favorite against good defense. And I think that the Ravens, notwithstanding the weird performance against Pittsburgh, which you can't throw out, but you kind of have to downgrade a little bit, because it feels like the Ravens always play these weird games against Pittsburgh, and maybe just Tomlin has the secret sauce in his scheming against Lamar. But I think this Ravens offense is fairly unstoppable, and with no conditions to deal with, they should be able to put up points on the Chargers. And then going the other way, I think now the big thing with the Chargers and the reorientation from preseason is that the whole thought, and when you just kind of pictured what the Chargers would look like, you thought that it would be, okay, run heavy, J.K. Dobbins running for 4 yards a pop, and then Justin Herbert having no one to throw to on 3rd and 5 or whatever, because of just his dearth of weapons. Like, Ladd McConkey is just really good. Quentin Johnston has taken a leap into usefulness. I don't think he's amazing, but he's useful. Josh Palmer as the third option is okay. Will Dissly is a fine pass-catching tight end. Like, I don't think that Justin Herbert's weapons are like appreciably worse than Josh Allen's weapons, and Josh Allen is the favorite to win MVP. So I think when you combine that with just good coaching, Herbert playing, I don't think Herbert's a real MVP candidate. He doesn't have the numbers, and they're 2 games back in the tiebreaker Kansas City for the division. So I don't think he's really a proper MVP candidate, but he's not playing far off that type of level. And so I think that you add it all up with the Ravens pass D, which just seems to be drawing dead, and we're 11 weeks in and it hasn't shown any signs. That I don't really see how these teams stop each other, particularly when you factor in that the way that you would think this might get driven under would be the Chargers overcommitting to the run and not having success. I just don't think they're going to do that, because I think they're going to need to keep pace with the Ravens scoring wise, and also they've shown more of a commitment to passing the ball. So I think you add it all up, and I think this is going to be a bit of a shootout ultimately. I thought your anti-Lamar situation was in a bit of trouble when Bryce Young heroically tied the score. Though, to be fair, I don't think there's ever been a tie game with a minute 42 left, or however long left there was, where I was more confident in one team winning the game than the other in the history of football.
Tune in tomorrow to hear why that was a good thing for the Pat Mahomes MVP case.
Indeed. All right. We are done for today. Don't forget to check out NBCsports.com for more information to help you with your wagers. Thanks to those watching on the NBC Sports YouTube channel. And if you're listening to us in podcast form, don't forget to rate and subscribe. Also a reminder to find all your favorite NBC Sports shows on Amazon Music. Just head to amazon.com/NBC Sports. From myself and Drew, we'll see you soon.